My wife and I moved to Mossman in 1965, and we lived in Mandalong Road down near Balmoral, number 28. It used to be, quite a long while ago, Cannon's Dance Hall. There was no trace of it left in our back garden, but we knew that it had been there, and that sort of interested my wife in Nairi, in Mossman's early history, which she'd lived in Mossman since the age of 3. And soon after we arrived in Mandalong Road, I started doing articles for the Mossman Daily about the streets of Mossman, and that ran in 1966 and 1967. There were a lot of them, and that was quite a good introduction for me as well to the history of Mossman. I didn't really get involved in doing Mossman history for quite a few years after that. I regard Mossman as really the richest of Sydney's suburbs with historical material. It's quite amazing the things that have happened in this place, starting with Governor Phillip being there 3 days before the first fleet arrived at Sydney Cove, which was a pretty early start for us. But of course, the Borragiggle people had been living in Mossman for at least 6,000 years. I guess Mossman's history started. But after Phillip, the Sirius, when it came back from the flagship of the First Fleet, it went to Cape Town in 1789 to bring back food because the colony was starving at Sydney Cove. And it had a very rough voyage back and was damaged on the rocks of Van Diemen's Land and needed repairing and refitting. And to do that, it went over to Mossman Bay, and the crew of the Sirius were living there for the best part of 6 months. So they were the first European settlers or residents of Mossman. I tend to think of Mossman as a peninsula, and at first glance looks like a pretty big peninsula, but if you regard it as spreading east from Cremorne fairly widely to start with, and then tapering off to get to Middlehead, it's very symmetrical. You've got something on the north side and something on the south side all the way along. Quaker's Hat Bay on the north side, Mossman Bay on the south side, the Spit on the north side, Bradley's Head on the south side, Balmoral on the north side, and Chowder Bay on the south side, and Cobbler's Beach on the north side as you get almost to Middlehead, and Obelisk Beach on the south side. It makes me think about a peninsula as a place that a lot of things have happened. For some reason tended to associate it with the Peninsular War, which was going on in Mossman's early period. And it's odd that this peninsula should have such a military association. Also, it became Middlehead very early became Sydney Cove's first outer defence with a battery on Middle Head for an enemy that never arrived but was expected to arrive any tick of the clock. George's Heights had a battery later, and more batteries were put in on Middle Head after the first one in 1801. This military association of Mossman's finds expression in Military Road, of course, which was put in to bring artillery to those sites of defence, Middle Head and Bradley's Head and George's Heights. And a lot of the streets are named after the battles in the Crimean War. So that's one of the things that give the texture that I mentioned to Mossman. The peninsula was, of course, all trees to start with, but because of the military connection and the reservations for military purpose that were there originally but no longer are, that military presence really preserved the bush in a much larger area than would otherwise have happened. So today you've got the marvellous combination of almost virgin bush all around the foreshores, and of course the foreshores being almost all around the peninsula, starting at Mossman Bay, and it's all going anti-clockwise. It's all either rocks, cliffs or beach, and then behind that trees, until you get around Middle Head, past Balmoral, past Chinaman's Beach, past the Spit, almost all the way to Quaker's Hat Bay, and then there's just a straight line across to Mossman Bay, which is now McPherson Street and Spofford Street. Another point in Mossman's history is the Theosophy Society, which in the 1920s became very interested in building an amphitheatre at the northern end of Balmoral. The purpose of it was to be a site from which it's difficult to explain, actually. The Theosophists who had a strong presence in Sydney by that time. The movement had been founded by a Russian woman called Madame Blavatsky. The local authority was Bishop Leadbeater, and this movement believed that one of the masters of the universe, called Lord Maitreya, who periodically manifested himself in such vehicles as Pythagoras, Confucius, Jesus Christ, Sophocles, was about to manifest himself again in a young Indian boy, or now by that time he was 17, called Krishnamurti, who had been found by Bishop Leadbeater and brought to Sydney, and was living in the Theosophist community at Clifton Gardens in a house called the Manor that used to belong to the Bakewell family. It was built by the Bakewells. And he was to be in the amphitheatre, which it cost £19,000 to build. It was a white painted concrete series of tiers, rising semicircular tiers with a proscenium and pillars in front, and it could seat 2,000 people with standing room for 1,000 more. And they were all to be there for the whatever was going to happen, the way they saw it. Krishnamurti was smart enough to, by the due date, he decided he wasn't going to be it, and he resigned from the movement. And the movement later collapsed in Sydney, and the amphitheatre was sold to the Catholic Church and eventually demolished. And there's now a red brick series of home units on the site, which is just past going northeast from Wyargin Point. It's a pity in a way the amphitheatre isn't still there as a ruin. It'd really be something to add to Balmoral, more perhaps than the home units are.